The Arts, Trauma, and COVID-19. My name is Jayden Britton, and this is my capstone project as an AFA third year in the music focus. Before diving in, I want to explain how this project came about. I took a step back during quarantine, and I realized that for myself, I have gained a new outlook on the arts. I have involved myself in other areas of the fine arts that I, quite frankly, did not have time to beforehand, but I really wanted to. And I wanted to know if other people have done the same thing. Hence, why this project was made. The CDC states that right now, we are living in a traumatic time. And when people live through trauma, they need a way of expressing it. They need a way of processing it. And many people turn to creative forms of therapy, visual art therapy, music therapy, creative writing, dance, musical theater. And I want to talk about those things. So first up, while it loads, because my computer's crap, I want to talk about the artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, who experienced his own trauma with a car crash. And when he was recovering in the hospital as a kid after the car crash, his mother presented him with a textbook on anatomy. And he was fascinated with anatomy after that. Because of that car crash and pairing that with a new source of material, he was able to express himself, express his experiences through his art by focusing on graffiti and anatomy, something that will always remind him of that car crash. As you can see here in this art piece, you can see back of the neck, spine, things are written down, and these are human body parts, something he focused on heavily. Next, we have Kurt Vonnegut, Sylvia Plath, and Charlotte Perkins Gilman, while this loads. Now, Kurt Vonnegut wrote the science fiction novel Slaughterhouse-Five, which details, in a weird way, his experience, and he was able to express his experience in World War II. Sylvia Plath was able to express her many attempts of suicide, her experience with that, through her poem Lady Lazarus, which was included in her collection of poems known as Ariel. And Charlotte Perkins Gilman was able to express her personal trauma being isolated as a form of recovery for her mental health through her wonderful short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. Moving on, we also have Erik, Satine, and Gustav Mahler. While I didn't choose these composers because they lived through a traumatic time, I chose these composers because they created fantastic works when they were isolated. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's inspiring knowing that if these composers, this man, Gustav Mahler, could spend his summers, the entire summer, isolating himself, writing music, I think it goes to show what we, the class of 2020, class of 2021, class of 2022, what we can do during this period of isolation. I think that's just inspiring. Moving on to my survey. Again, while this loads, it's okay. Now, I crafted my survey to ask people about their engagement in the arts, both before and during the pandemic. I asked control questions such as age, gender, and number of arts-based classes, but I also asked them to explain to me their experience of the amount of time they're spending per month, per day, per week engaging the arts, as well as when they sit down to do the arts, how long they spend doing the arts. And then I had what areas of the fine arts one is engaged in: musical theater, dance, creative writing, photography, videography, culinary, as well as reasonings for engagement, as well as their viewpoints on the arts. Now, these 4 questions were asked both before and during the pandemic in reference. All right, I'm back. So, the amount of people who took this survey, the majority of the people who took it were 15, 16, and 17. The rest of the people were either 14 to 13 or 18 to 19. And then, one thing I find interesting, 78.1% of the people who took the survey identify as female. 17% of the people who took the survey identify as male. And then the rest preferred not to say agender, genderqueer, or identified as non-binary, as well as gender fluid. And then the next question I had to categorize responses, which is the main one I used to categorize responses, was how many arts-based classes was somebody taking this semester? The majority of people were taking 1, 54.4%. The next highest people were taking 0 arts-based classes, that was 18.5%. And then the next highest, 14.4%, were people taking 2. The other responses varied between 3 and 7. Very surprising, 7. Now we're on to the variety of the fine arts engaged before the pandemic. This is where things get cool. So, if you look at this graph, I labeled things in order from highest to lowest. Theater was at the highest with 98 people participating in theater before the pandemic. And videography and culinary were the lowest with 2 people participating. And then right here we have 6 people who said they weren't participating at all in the fine arts. One thing was fun is that somebody who answered the survey said, just talked about their country for the whole survey, nothing about the arts, which I found interesting. So I just grouped them in none. So the main things I would like to point out is 98 people participated in theater, 88 sketching and drawing, musical theater 71, creative writing 50. Let's see how these move for during the pandemic. Theater and musical theater both had drastic decreases. Theater went down from 98 to 53. Musical theater went down from 71 to 26 people engaged in it. Now, I looked through the responses and there weren't any really clear details about why they weren't participating in theater anymore, but I've come up with a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that theater and musical theater require such a level of social activity that people can't have that right now. There are high school plays and musicals that are just canceled now because of the virus, as well as a lot of community theater opportunities that, quite frankly, will not happen until 2021. So that's my thoughts for why theater and musical theater had such a decrease. But let's look at sketching and drawing. Sketching and drawing went up from 88 to 122 people engaged for during the pandemic. And I thought this was interesting, as the visual arts are fantastic, but I didn't expect something to have this big of an increase. Another big increase was creative writing went up from 50 to 62, which I thought was also really cool. In general, visual arts had a giant increase. The world of theater had a huge decrease. Music also went up. Instrumental music went down by 1. Again, not really sure why. But music, vocal music, went up to 92 from their wonderful amount of 73. Now let's look at dance. Dance started off at 75 people engaged, and then they went to 78. So they had an increase as well, but it wasn't quite big enough to state, there's a big reason why people are doing dance. Only 3 other people joined in on dance, which is great, but doesn't really show enough evidence that something may have happened to them to want to participate in dance. Anyways, although the amount of people not participating in the arts went up by 2, from 6 to 8. Before diving into the decrease and the increase of engagement again, let's dive into the just decrease of time spent. Now, before the pandemic, the average amount of time spent was about 2 hours outside of school engaging in the arts, and 1.8 hours during school engaging in the arts. Now, during this pandemic, both of those have decreased. Now, people average about 1.5 hours outside of school engaging in the arts and 1 hour during school or as part of their distance learning engaging in the arts. Again, there wasn't really solid evidence to explain why there was this decrease, because most people, as we'll go in, stated that they had more time to explore the arts. I went through all the responses from 0 to 5, referencing the number of arts-based classes people are engaging in. I went through all of those responses, and 40% of people taking 0 and 1 arts-based class said 40% of the responses stated that they had more time to explore the arts. The highest was 50% of people taking 3 arts-based classes said they had more time. 48% of people taking 2 arts-based classes, 43% of people taking 4 art classes, and 33% of people taking 5 art classes all said that they had more time. But yet time spent has decreased. Why? I don't know. There wasn't enough data or explanation from the responses for me to create these conclusions. I have hypotheses, but I don't have any solid data. Another thing that was quite prevalent was a lot of people expressed a desire to return to a normal life, wanted to go back to the way things were so they could enjoy the arts in a way that was better for them. 24% of people taking 0 art-based classes, 20% of the people taking 1 art-based class, 32% of people taking 2 arts-based classes, 33% of people taking 5 arts-based classes said they wanted to return back to normal and they wanted to have in-class art-based engagement. Another trend that I found was that a lot of people seem to be dealing or showing signs of burnout in their responses. One specific response stated that they felt they were just turning into an endless void because they were watching too much television and they have no motivation to do the arts anymore. Shocked me. But did it surprise me and shock me as much as I thought? No, because it makes sense during a traumatic time that you lose your motivation to do things. And quite frankly, I'm more surprised that people say that the arts mean so much more to them now and that the arts have maintained the level of importance to them. More people have said that than said that they've been turned away from the arts. Moving on, if it loads. Participation changes since the pandemic began. The visual arts received a 36% increase of engagement. Creative writing was the second highest with 24% increase. Music had an 11% increase. Dance had a 4% increase. Music and dance, not necessarily big enough increases to state something. But musical theater had a 47% decrease. And I shared my ideas about why they might have had this beforehand. My thoughts on this experience. This was fun. I actually enjoyed spending an entire day sorting through 270 responses. I would have structured this survey in a different way, if I could do it again, to be able to sort through responses easier. But in any ways, this opened my eyes a lot to how people are experiencing the arts in regards to coronavirus, COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. But I think it's important to know that the arts are, in my opinion, they are more important now than ever. They are such a more important platform for people to express themselves that it's something that needs to be utilized. My time's up. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation, and I miss you all greatly. Keep doing art. Art is the best. Woo. Or whatever makes you happy. Do whatever makes you happy. Anyways, that is it. Goodbye.